Hi everyone, it's lovely to see you. We are reading The Mystery of the Smuggler's Wreck by Helen Moss, and this is chapter 15, Into the Maze. Before long, Jack, Scott and Emily were propping their bikes against a giant oak in the woods that surrounded Pendragon Manor on the west coast of Castle Key. Drift hopped down from his basket on the back of Emily's bike and trotted behind them along the path that wound its way through a sea of bluebells. Moments later, they arrived at a tall hedge and peeped through to the landscaped gardens. Beyond the sweeping lawns, a grand staircase guarded by stone lions led up to a terrace and the Tudor mansion itself. The rambling old house with its deeply sloping roofs, huge chimneys and diamond-leaded windows was no longer occupied by the Pendragon family, but was now a popular venue for weddings and conferences. The house and grounds were also open to the public on certain days of the week. Emily had checked the website before they left, and unfortunately this wasn't one of them. But there'd been a unanimous vote. There was no way they could wait until next Tuesday, the next day the house was open to the public, to explore the maze for the smugglers' hiding place. Which was why Jack was now gaining entry to the garden by commando crawling under the hedge rather than walking through the main gate. He poked his head out through the branches for a recce. He could hear distant chatter and the clink of glasses. There was a party of men in suits and ladies in brightly coloured dresses up on the terrace, but the rest of the garden was empty. "All clear," he hissed. Emily, Scott and Drift squeezed through the hedge and darted across the vast expanse of lawn like soldiers crossing no man's land. They threw themselves into the cover of the maze. Phase 1 accomplished, Emily whispered, pulling the map from her bag. Before they set out, Scott had used his cocoa technique to darken the pattern on the plaster, photographed it, enlarged the image and printed it out. Then he pasted in the small missing section at the edge from the printout of Kelly's video. Emily consulted the diagram, pointing to an opening in the outer line. "This must be the entrance," she hissed. There was something about the silent stillness within the ancient maze that made them all whisper. "Which means it's this way." Jack turned left and marched confidently between the towering walls of dark, dense foliage. After more than an hour in the maze, they still hadn't found the centre. Scott and Jack were arguing about whether they should have taken a right instead of a left 3 turns back. Emily was wondering whether they'd made a massive mistake. Maybe the pattern on the compass wasn't the map of the maze after all, and she realised if the piece of paper she was clutching in her hand wasn't a map of the maze, it wasn't a map out of it either. She was starting to think they'd be wandering among the dark hedges all day, when Drift flicked up his ears and ran on ahead. She chased after him round a hairpin bend and came out in a circular clearing. "The heart of the maze," Emily breathed. "Awesome," Jack shouted, breaking out of a whisper for the first time. He turned to Scott, who was just behind him. "Told you we were on the right track." Excitedly, the 3 friends began to search for the smuggler's hoard. There was a brass plaque set into the grass in the middle, but no amount of pressing or pulling revealed a hidden entrance. They were starting to investigate the wooden bench that ran around the edge of the clearing when a loud, angry voice made them all jump. "What do you kids think you're doing?" Scott looked up to see a man the size of a buffalo glaring down at them. His huge head was topped with tight coppery curls and his neck disappeared into muscle-bound shoulders. "Oh no, it's the compass thief," Scott thought. "He's looking for the smuggler's hoard too. We might as well give up now. We don't stand a chance against this giant." But then he noticed a badge pinned to the man's green overalls. Dan Holworthy, gardener. It was okay. He just worked here, and surely gardeners were nice, gentle people who liked growing things. "The gardens aren't open to the public today," the gardener roared, looking for anything but gentle. "We're with the party," Jack said nervously, "just having a look around." The gardener eyed him suspiciously. "You're attending the Cornish Sausage Manufacturers' annual conference?" "Yeah, we were invited because we are..." Jack's voice tailed off. What would they be doing at a sausage convention? "Because we're their best customers," Emily piped up. "We're special guests." Sausages," Scott freeformed. "Can't get enough of them." Drift wagged his tail. Sausages was one of his favourite words. He couldn't figure out why everyone kept saying it when there wasn't even the slightest whiff of sausage in the air. The grumpy gardener wasn't happy. "Well, the maze is out of bounds, and if I catch you lot trespassing again, you'll feel my boot against your backsides." He kicked the air of their gargantuan hobnailed boot to demonstrate. "I'm pruning in here, and I can't have members of the public wandering around." What was his problem? Scott grumbled as he slunk back to the lawn. Anyone would think we'd broken into Buckingham Palace. More to the point, what was he up to? Emily murmured. Pruning, Jack said. He told us. Oh yeah, Emily snorted. Where were his shears then? Jack shrugged. Scott thought for a moment. You're right, and we'd have heard him sniffing away if he'd really been pruning. So what do we do now? Jack asked. Simple, Emily said. You can't garden at night. We'll wait until he's gone and we'll try again. Emily, Scott, Jack and Drift established a stakeout position behind a magnolia bush near the staff car park and, sustained only by Jack's pack of emergency jelly beans, waited until they spotted Dan Holworthy climbing into an old jeep, revving the engine and roaring off down the road towards Trigger. Then they crept back across the lawn and into the maze. It was early evening by now. The corridors between the tall yew hedges were steeped in shadow. The friends swiftly retraced their steps through the twists and turns and arrived at the centre of the labyrinth. There has to be a trapdoor down here somewhere, Emily whispered, crawling under the circular bench. Drift had no idea what they were looking for, but he joined the search too. He never turned down the chance for a really good snuffle around old tree roots, although these yews were a bit disappointing. There were no scent mark updates to read because dogs, ordinary dogs who weren't assisting their owner on a special operation that was, weren't allowed in the maze. A hint of squirrel trail mixed with boot leather wafted past Drift's nose. He burrowed further into the bottom of the hedge to investigate. When he came out on the other side, he found himself in a small grassy area surrounded on all sides by more of those dark, creepy hedges that made his fur stand on end. As he turned to go back, his paw caught on something in the grass, but when he tried to pick it up in his teeth, it wouldn't budge. Emily might be interested in this. On the other side of the hedge, Emily heard an alert bark. She looked up from under the bench, but her right-hand dog was nowhere to be seen. She heard a second bark. It was coming from the other side of the hedge, yet there was no gap in the solid wall of yew. Drift stuck on the other side, she cried. Don't worry, I'll find him. Jack charged at the hedge in a high-speed shoulder barge. Emily's hands flew to her face. The dense mesh of branches and twigs had been trained to come right down to the ground to prevent people breaking through to cheat their way into the centre of the maze. She waited for Jack's cries as he became caught up and scratched to ribbons in the thick hedge. But to her surprise, he simply disappeared. Join me for chapter 16.